Hey, sweetie, your mother showed me this Carvana thing for selling the car. I'm gonna give it a try. Wish me luck. Me again. I put in the license plate. It gave me an offer. Unbelievable. Okay, I accepted the offer. They're picking it up Tuesday from the driveway. I haven't even left my chair. It's done. The car is gone. I'm holding a check. Anyway, Carvana, give it a whirl. Love ya.
So good, you'll want to leave a voicemail about it. Sell your car today on Carvana. Pickup fees may apply.
The James Golden Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome, my friends, to the Memorial Day edition of Bo Snerdley's Rush Hour, fastest hour in American media. And here we are I'm looking at an article as we speak, ladies and gentlemen. Here's why you shouldn't say Happy Memorial Day and what you should say instead. In a proclamation today, President Trump said Memorial Day is a day to honor American heroes and especially remember the 13 service members of the Joint Force who lost their lives in the war with Iran. All Americans inherit the glorious gift of liberty that has been purchased with the spilled blood of brave warriors and the tears and heartache of those they left behind, says the Memorial Day proclamation issued by President Trump. It is fitting and necessary for our nation to pause for an annual reminder of the enduring and perilously high cost of freedom, but the immeasurable gravity of what has been sacrificed for the greater good deserves our eternal reverence and unwavering gratitude every day. And I could not agree with those sentiments more. Joining us on this Memorial Day, he's here with us on most American holidays, is our official historian, Dean Karayanis, who is colleague of mine. For the many years we were with Rush Limbaugh. Dean, of course, runs a website, head honcho of a website called historyauthor.com. He is an author himself, established author. He is a columnist with the New York Sun, and you can find his columns floating roundabout in cyberspace in many places as people repost them, always interesting columns from Dean Karayanis. Besides that, he's an author of other things as well. Cuisine, Greek cuisine, one of my favorite books from Dean, explores the fascinations that we all have with beautiful tasting delicacies from Greece. Dean, welcome. And since we are not supposed to say Happy Memorial Day, let us just acknowledge this day of remembrance, and we're glad to have you here for it. How are you, Dean?
I'm okay. I'm always better after your introduction. I've never been called a honcho before. Honcho, yes. That sounds good. I like that.
Head honcho.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm working out. My wife is the head honcho. I'm working my way up to associate honcho. We'll see how things go.
Love it. Let's talk for a moment about Memorial Day, and then I'm going to ask you about some of the things in the news, Dean. Since we're here and since there is news going on, we have some audio bites that we'll get into as well. Walk us through the history, Mr. Historian, of Memorial Day in our country.
It begins as, I don't know, I guess you'd call it spontaneous or being generated at the same time. It's not much of a tradition. It's people decorating graves, which is something that we still do today and that people have always done. Human beings have always done. But then the Civil War, of course, the death toll is so huge. There's so many dead that various places in the country, Waterloo, New York, plans to be the first place, the birthplace, in 1866. They set aside a specific day that everyone will go to these graves and will decorate them. Boatsburg, Pennsylvania did a similar thing in 1864. In Charleston, where there were many of the black soldiers, there was over 180,000 that people forget served in the Army then. And they have a parade. They begin decorating the graves. And then the Grand Army of the Republic, which was the big Union veterans organization after the Civil War, in 1868, they declare a single decoration day, and they say, let's go do this for all the graves. And they had a women's auxiliary, and they go out and start doing it, and it carries on that way until, believe it or not, really recently. 1971 is the first time that it's set firmly for the last Monday in May, which is today, which is why we celebrate it today. So it's one of those interesting things that kind of reflects the Civil War. Before the Civil War, historians like to say this kind of really smart, clever sounding phrase, but it's true that the United States, people said are, and today we say the United States is, made it a nation. So you had a bunch of different states that were all competing. This happened with Thanksgiving in World War II. FDR wanted to move it earlier to make the Christmas season longer, because that was one of his ideas to fight the Great Depression, make people shop more. And the Republican states said, no, we're keeping Thanksgiving where it's always been. And gradually over all that time, and it's a reflection in the small way of the sacrifice of those soldiers and our universal respect for them as Americans, that eventually becomes just a single day where we look at them and we remember what they sacrificed. And I know people often confuse it with Veterans Day, and it's not the same. And it shouldn't also be a day that we jump on people. If somebody says Happy Memorial Day, they're just maybe trying to correct us, even though I'm listening very tensely for someone to make that misstep. I try not to pounce on them, because every time you do that, it's an opportunity to discuss with somebody something like the Great War or the war in the Philippines, wars that maybe we'd rather not talk about, that we forget about, the Mexican-American War. And so eventually this one day was set aside for all of those as one nation to come together and remember the sacrifice of the people who gave everything. In the case of the unknown soldier and all those like them, everything, even their names they gave. All of their tomorrows, everything they ever had or would have. So that's how Memorial Day comes to be this really sacred holiday today that we mark.
On the Daily BS today, there was a story today about a World War II a speech that was made by David Yoho, 97 years old, a merchant marine who enlisted when he was just 16 years old. And one of the things that he said is, tell them about veterans and say to them that we gave up our yesterdays for your tomorrow. We gave up our yesterdays for your tomorrows. And if they say to you, who did you hear speak those words? Tell them it was a 16-year-old boy in the heart and mind and body of a 98-year-old veteran of World War II. Just beautiful and profound. And I am happy that at least there is this remembrance that happens on this day. When you said fairly recently, and when you just said that in the 70s, how it changed, it kind of jarred me for a moment, because I remember, I'm old enough to remember when Memorial Day was celebrated on the 30th of every May. And I remember when it was changed over too, and there's some people were not happy at the time that it was being changed to a Monday, because no matter what day it was, whatever day it fell on the 30th, that was the day. And a lot of people wanted to keep that tradition because they thought it didn't just become another 4-day weekend or another whatever with a Monday being off. They liked the idea of Memorial Day being recognized on whatever day of the week it fell on. And do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, Time Magazine wrote a year later, as I was looking back and researching some of the evolution of Memorial Day, they wrote that a 3-day nationwide hootenanny, there's a word you don't hear much anymore unless you are a real fan of old Zell Miller clips maybe, making it a 3-day nationwide hootenanny seems to have lost much of its original purpose. And I could see that, but then again, if it was in the middle of the week, maybe we would have less of the parades. We would have fewer, rather, of the parades. We would have less remembrance because people wouldn't have that longer weekend to to really commemorate it. For instance, in my little town that I live in New Jersey, the parade is rained out one day, you're able to have it on another day. And those may seem like small things, but those parades mean so much to the veterans. Even though this isn't Veterans Day, I understand that very well. But I've spoken to a lot of veterans for the History Author show. One gentleman who you made me think of there was at Pearl Harbor. He lost so many of his friends aboard the USS West Virginia. I interviewed him when he was 103 years old. The oldest man to ever publish a book was Lieutenant Jim Downing. And he marked Memorial Day remembering his friends. And we should remember that those veterans and military families that have that empty chair at the dinner table every year, the children, the spouses, this is a day for us to, those of us who are fortunate enough not to have that immediate connection, that didn't suffer that loss, that didn't watch our comrade, our friend from our town, that so many did in the Great War, whole towns, everyone you knew, all the guys would go off to war together, and maybe you were the only one who survived. So I think that that's something that the longer weekend maybe gives us time to reflect and think about that in a way that it just doesn't if it fell in the middle of the week. So I prefer to look at it with a little bit of a sunny spin, I guess, that we have it.
Yeah, and you know, one of our, and I don't have permission to use his name, but one of our workmates from the Rush Limbaugh program reflected with us, and we would talk about it inside the studio with him. He never met his grandfather. His grandfather was one of those who gave his life in World War II. And so he never met his grandfather. And the family, it was so significant for them when they got a chance to go to Normandy and see the marker, the grave of his grandfather there. It's an emotional thing. And for those that served with fallen service members, absolutely, this is a day that means so much to those veterans whose friends, whose buddies, in some cases people that saved their lives, perished so that they could survive the horrors of war. It is a really deep and emotional thing.
Yeah, I can't imagine going there and having that sort of connection. The only small comparison I have is one of my cousins who I never met also. I had seen him all my life. He's this big painting of him in my great aunt's house. And we used to hear stories about him and that he fought at the Battle of the Bulge and they never recovered his remains. And then my great uncle went searching Europe after the war for his son, convinced he'd been taken as a POW. And there was a little park named in the town after him. But the thing that really brings it home is one day I see a picture of him when he was much younger than me, which was ridiculous. You think how young all these soldiers always are. This guy's 19, 20, 21. I think 21 was the average age storming Normandy. And they called him, he was a Sergeant Petros Two-Gun Pete Loizides. And I look at a picture of him when I reached that age, and it was so similar to how I looked that it kind of gave me a chill. And I'm thinking, that's what connects you to it. And when you go to the grave and you see your name on that gravestone, as you were speaking about one of our former Rush colleagues, you connect with it in a different way. And to have a day that maybe you reach somebody who doesn't think they have a part in the American story, who doesn't think that they're connected to somebody who, they died before I was born. Maybe they're just a dusty black and white photograph in a photo album. This holiday is really to invite everybody into that family, to remind everybody that we're their posterity and that we carry a burden, therefore, to make this that more perfect union that the founders wrote about, and even the founding generation. That's my column today in the New York Sun. We're still finding Revolutionary War soldiers that are buried under houses, that are excavated when people dig out for the foundations of buildings. They never got the burial they deserved, and I think it's so beautiful. It's such a great thing about Americans that we still give them an honored burial, even when we find them at this late date.
That is wonderful. Hold on, Dean, please. Dean Karayanis is with us on this Memorial Day.
The James Golden Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Adobe Firefly is the all-in-one creative studio with AI-powered image and video editing for today's creative process. Built for creators of every kind, Firefly helps you generate, edit, and experiment fast. Because the asks aren't getting smaller, the budgets aren't getting bigger, and the timelines, oh yeah, still tight. With all the best creative AI models in one place, Firefly brings your ideas to life. Unlock a better way to make with Adobe Firefly.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
The James Golden Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And on this Memorial Day, Pope Leo XIV has called for AI to be disarmed, but that's not all he did. Let us listen to some of his words. Here is the Pope.
Artificial intelligence needs to be disarmed. The word is strong, I know, but deliberately chosen because this moment needs words capable of attracting attention, awakening consciences, and indicating paths forward for humanity. The Church has long been working for nuclear disarmament, aware that every great technical power can affect people's lives, and so must be accompanied by adequate moral discernment and public control. Nuclear disarmament remains a service to peace and the dignity of the human family. In a similar sense, artificial intelligence now demands to be disarmed, freed from logics that turn it into an instrument of domination, exclusion, and death. Like nuclear energy, it must be at the service of all and of the common good.
These are strong words. Dean Karayanis is with us. Dean, when we get back from the next break, I want to talk about that, but the Pope also did something else. He made a historic apology for the Vatican's role in legitimizing slavery. And this, I think, is huge. Past popes have apologized for Christians' involvement in the transatlantic slave trade, but no pope has ever publicly acknowledged, much less apologized, for the role that past pontiffs have played in giving European sovereigns explicit authority to subjugate and enslave infidels. That is what the Associated Press says of it. Dean Karayanis is here, and he and I are going to talk about this when we get back.
The James Golden Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The James Golden Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
James Golden Snerdley. Dean Karayanis is with us. Dean, the Pope, you heard the quote on AI, and we have other things to talk about American politics, but I do want to spend a few moments on this. The Pope says that it's impossible not to feel deep sorrow when contemplating the immense suffering and humiliation endured by so many, speaking of people that were in slavery. And he's apologized for the Catholic Church's role in slavery, which is a profound role, and not many people know the history of that. For instance, in 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued a papal bull, Dum Dervasis, which gave the Portuguese king and his successors the right to invade, conquer, fight, subjugate, take all possessions, including land, of Saracens, pagans, and other infidels and enemies in the name of Christ. The bull also gave Portuguese permission to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery. 3 years later, Romanus Pontifex had the doctrine of discovery. It legitimized the colonial era seizure of land in Africa and in the Americas. And it goes on and on, this history. And the Pope today issued an apology for all of this. Do you think historical apologies mean something, Dean? And how do you look at these sorts of apologies for things that happened now centuries ago?
Well, I think it can do good if it's followed with action. And I'm wondering if in 400 years, say, is a pope going to apologize for this Pope Leo going to Algiers? And there's what, I think, I wrote the number down, 84,000 slaves in Algeria right now. Not a word from the Pope goes to all of these Arab countries, African countries, where there's still slavery. There's 7 million people held in forms of slavery today in Africa. So when I hear it, it just seems empty. It's one thing if you're going to apologize, and we all know this from our relationships, right? I apologize to my wife for doing something wrong, which I do often, probably not as often as I should, and then I just keep doing that thing, then it's not really a sincere apology. So I think if you're apologizing on behalf of, for instance, in that case, I guess we're talking about the Iberians, the Spanish peninsula there, and the Portuguese, and what they did in South and Central America and much of North America, then I could see that connecting if there's also an effort to make amends and to avoid repeating the same mistakes. And we ignore, and I don't say this just as a rhetorical point or to own the libs as people like to do, but I'm so thankful for my life and the freedom we have in America. And I think of our Archbishop Jacobos, who marched in Selma with Dr. Martin Luther King. And he said, I'm going because when I was raised in Turkey, I wasn't even a third-class citizen. And it's the obligation of every free person to speak out when somebody's being denied their liberty. And so when I see this from the Pope, and I don't know, you can be a pope or a pundit the way I look at it. Unless you're going to do something concrete, unless you're going to spend some of that gold that you have there in the Vatican, I don't know what point it serves other than it makes a lot of people that maybe he'd like to impress really pleased with him. So maybe those things are coming. I don't know, but I haven't heard anything about it. And as for AI, it's funny he says nuclear disarmament is something similar, because right now we're engaging in Iran with trying to deny a homicidal regime nuclear weapons, and he's not a fan of that. So I guess that's a good thing about being Pope. You can just say things. You don't really have to put action behind them.
Interesting take. Dean,
and I'm sorry,
speaking of Iran, let us listen to President Trump for a few moments. Cut 2. Carlos, this is what Fox is reporting today.
And the Trump administration says the deal with Iran is 95% complete, but there are still some final details to be addressed. On a call yesterday with reporters, a senior administration official indicated the memorandum of understanding may take several days to reach because the Iranian system doesn't move as fast as the United States would like. The official added that the current plan is to formally end the war and open the Strait of Hormuz without tolls before eventually dealing with all enriched nuclear material in Iran and not permitting further enrichment. Now, Iran will receive billions of dollars worth of assets unfrozen, along with oil sanctions waivers. U.S. officials say that will only take place if they uphold their end of the bargain. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said this today about the negotiations.
We're still a work in progress. We have what I think is a pretty solid thing on the table in terms of their ability to open up the straits, get the straits open, enter into a very real, significant, time-limited negotiation on the nuclear matters. And hopefully we can pull it off. It has a lot of support in the Gulf. It has a lot of support globally. Every country that we've walked through it understands it's not just very reasonable, but it's the right thing for the world to get done. As the president said, he's not in a hurry. He's not going to make a bad deal.
On Sunday,
all right,
President
Dean,
Trump
I think we've got enough there. From what we're hearing, we've been hearing all weekend, the president stayed in Washington, D.C. At one time, it was like, we're close to a deal, then we're not close to a deal, we're close to... And we've heard this before. This isn't the first time. But it appears that a deal is forming. Any thoughts that you have on what this and how this deal, more importantly, will be looked at by the American people, particularly the Republican Senate, who are having a temper tantrum right now?
Nice use of temper tantrum. That's a sweet Peter Jennings reference. Don't think I missed that one. But what he said after the 94 Republican victory in the House and Senate. But anyway, yeah, they I think are going to be looking to the election. That's their thing. A lot of them don't have much of a spine. As Margaret Thatcher said to George H.W. Bush in the Gulf War, don't go wobbly on me. I expect that they'll go wobbly if there's a lot in the press, and there will be in the press, that says this deal is no good, because he can never do anything, President Trump, that will please his critics, and his critics are many and varied. And I think of the example from the pandemic where he was nationalizing a bunch of companies basically to pump out ventilators, which, by the way, turned out to be a death sentence if he used one. And they asked Nancy Pelosi, well, how many ventilators do you need? And she said, infinite ventilators. We need infinite ventilators. So it's an impossible bar that they are always going to set. They're so excited about declaring this a quagmire. It was 3 days in, and we've lost fewer soldiers, not that each and every one isn't on Memorial Day a tragedy for those families and a criminal waste of life in the grand scheme of things, but we've lost less than we did when we invaded Grenada. And Grenada is about the size, I think, half the size of Philadelphia. So a little perspective, and this is the same number that was lost just at Abbey Gate during Biden's withdrawal. And if we don't count numbers, I don't mean to reduce the lives lost to numbers, but whatever it is, they're going to say that it's not enough. And that's why it's so important to get people out there like Marco Rubio who can really advocate for the deal. So he has to be on board for it if he's going to advocate for it. Because I think if we don't do that, they're just going to declare it a loss. They never want to declare anything a win. They just don't. They don't have a setting for it. Trump always has to lose, always has to be terrible. And it's not that sometimes he might be wrong. Sure, of course, he's wrong. There's lots of things that any thinking person cringes at, but there's not every single thing. The guy can't walk across the street without them impeaching him for jaywalking. So I don't know. It's amazing to me that he can even get the Iranians to talk to him. Because if I was them, I would probably just try to wait him out, which is what they've been trying to do. But they see in him somebody who just doesn't care about the public opinion. And that's one of the kind of liberating things, as our colleague, another Rush colleague at the old Rush Limbaugh show, George Pius, Toko, says that Trump is in a unique position. He's not running for re-election again. He had kind of this rest between his two terms to really study up on what he's going to do. And Iran has always vexed the American people. Hillary said she was going to bomb them. Bill Clinton said he was going to bomb them. All the Democrats, everyone said they can't have a nuclear weapon. And he's the first guy not starting this war. They want to say it's Trump's war. They went to war with us when they invaded our embassy. And they blew up our Marines, the Marine barracks. They were giving IEDs to the terrorists in Iraq. They've been killing Americans for a real long time. This is finally fighting fire with fire instead of letting them pick off soldiers here and there one by one. So I hope that it's a good deal. I hope that he doesn't trust them. But I think whatever he does, he has to really sell it, because the press is not going to ever report anything favorably on the guy. And that's why I guess the best position to have is just not care. If you think it's a good deal, pass it. And it has to be better than watching New York City go up under a mushroom cloud someday.
Let's move on to the DNC autopsy really quickly. Scott Jennings, who I love, delivered one of my favorite lines on a Cut 11. Carlos, CNN, he was on a panel, Scott Jennings, this on Kamala Harris and the DNC autopsy.
Do you see something in that? I mean, is that profound because it rhymes? I mean, look, she doesn't have to be...
I do think it was very well said.
She doesn't have to be flawless, but she has to give you something. I mean, she's like a true double threat. You know, she's terrible on her feet when she gets unexpected questions, and simultaneously, she can't even answer the expected questions. It's nothing, nothing, nothing. You'd think she'd be prepared to do this by now. You know, what's a mistake you've made? Nothing. What's a weakness you have? Nothing. What's the first law you want to pass? Nothing. What's a policy difference between you and Joe Biden? Nothing. Over and over and over. Empty, empty, empty. If she were an animal, she'd be a duck-billed platitude.
But look,
it's a total world
fair.
Now, Chris Van Hollen, Mr. Margarita, who, by the way, has been in touch with Kilmar Abreu Garcia's wife and he, the MS-13 terrorists, over the weekend to celebrate the fact that he had another judicial ruling in his favor, was critical of the DNC autopsy release. Cut 10, here's Senator Margaritaville, Chris Van Hollen.
Well, Nancy, this is a very shoddy piece of work. It's an incomplete piece of work, and I can understand why Ken Martin was reluctant to release it earlier. But as he has said, he owns this problem. He should have just ripped the Band-Aid off earlier and put it out. No, we're 6 months from a very important election, and we should not be changing horses at this time. I will say that the overall thrust of the report indicates that, we should not just go back to the Trump status quo. And I've said from the beginning, it was a failure, obviously, of the Democratic Party to lose to someone like Donald Trump a second time.
What do you make of the whole kerfuffle over the DNC autopsy?
I thought it was a flap, but yes, it's a kerfuffle the more I think about it. And I look at the key words here are, what did we do wrong? And I love that, and the idea of mistakes, because it speaks of somebody who isn't willing to recognize that sometimes you lose. You're a Cowboys fan. I'm a Giants fan. We're very familiar at this point in the lives of those two franchises with losing. Sometimes you lose. Sometimes you do everything you can and you lose, and then you're supposed to look. This was a Rushism. Rush said, you have to be honest about the reasons you lost, or you're never going to fix it. And that's exactly what this is. Like, what do you mean what you did wrong? Sometimes you just do everything that you think of, and your things turn out to be wrong, and you lose. But they don't have really a setting for that, I don't think. It's kind of like that show Parker Lewis Can't Lose, which I usually associate with President Trump in my columns, but in this case, that's how they feel. Like, well, everybody sees Trump and Republicans exactly as this caricature that they've invented of them, instead of recognizing that in politics, which is crazy because they have a lot of political people there, instead of recognizing that in politics, sometimes the opponent isn't seen by the public the way you wish to see them. The Bill Clinton used to drive us nuts right at the Rush show days. And why? Because we would bring up the character, and he had that glint in his eye that said to people, especially the ladies, well, I never made a secret that I love the ladies. Yeah, I never made a secret. That's true. There's a lot of ladies that I liked, but I love this country. That's how the guy came across to people, and you couldn't talk them out of it any more than, when a man loves a woman, right? It doesn't matter if she's bad. He can't see it. And that was the case with this. And they still can't see it. They're just depending on never, ever being wrong. And that's not a way to win any elections.
Well, I'm happy for it. I don't want them to win. I want them to continue to get the wrong messages. Dean, hold on. We got to take a break. When we get back, clip of the day. It is time, ladies and gentlemen, for the clip of the day. It is not related to politics at all. At all. I can only say that. It is so not related to politics. It's totally related to what is wrong in segments of American culture. James Golden Snerdley.
The James Golden Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The James Golden Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, time for the clip of the day, also the song of the day. Dean Karayanis, we want to thank you for being with us today. Thank you. And you have to come back soon. We didn't get to so many things I wanted to talk about, so maybe we'll just do a non-holiday appearance with you, Dean, and talk about some more politics stuff, okay?
Okay, thank you for having me, and I'm sorry, I probably talk too much.
No, you never talk too much. I love hearing you. Dean, listen to the clip of the day, all of you. I only play this clip because if I don't play it, no one else will. When it is not political at all. It's a news report out of Arizona, but there is nothing else like it for the clips that we have. And so here is your clip of the day out of Fox Local in Arizona.
We begin, though, with a disturbing break-in in downtown Phoenix. It has led to horrific charges, really unimaginable charges against a local man. 31-year-old Fenris Liu is accused of using a crowbar to break into the Maricopa County Medical Examiner's office and gaining access to corpses. And according to multiple law enforcement sources, Liu was caught on camera breaking the seal on several body bags and having sexual contact with several of the bodies. This morning, he was arrested, and he is now facing multiple felonies, including burglary, escape, and 4 counts of sexual conduct with a dead body. The prosecution has sealed court documents to protect the integrity of the investigation and allow officials time to notify the victims' families. Lou is currently being held on a $500,000 cash bond.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, from Maricopa County. Maricopa County sure is an interesting place, isn't it, Dean?
Yeah. I see that if he's convicted, he'll have to wear an ankle monitor, but I don't think it's his ankle that they need to monitor.
Time for the song. Thank you, Dean. Thank you for being with us, Dean. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to The James Golden Show. You can hear The James Golden Show Saturday mornings at 7. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?